This commercial uses paid actors in a Becker Polyakov origin story recreation.
Alec, come on, wake up! It's time to get to work! So lazy, come on!
Can I get some of this stuff with the assessor glass? Sure, if you vote for me, I'm out there. Do you know what I really need? Do you know where I can get a good condo lawyer? That's it! We'll be rich!
If I were a rich man.
Gary and I met in law school, and in the last year, Gary and I did a trial practice class where, frankly, the people we normally teamed up with had teamed up with other people, so Gary and I became a team in that trial practice by default, and we did a real trial. And then after law school, Gary went to work for his father-in-law in manufacturing business, and I started my own law firm with a couple of other guys. About 3 years later, I decided to run for the Florida legislature. I went out campaigning. I won the election, came back to the office, and my two partners said, we decided we don't want a politician in our law firm. And I called Gary Polyakov, and I told him this story. And Gary said, well, you know, I don't like working in the manufacturing business. I'm trained as a lawyer. Why don't we practice together? I said, let's do it. And that's when we started our firm.
Continental introduces a new mark. Continental Mark IV.
Oh, how can you not know the story? That's the signature story that all the kids who are new kids and new kids on the block got a chance to hear.
Working out of the trunk store for Alan and Gary was this. It's together. The story lives on in infamy. I don't know whose idea it was, but my understanding was they both drove Lincolns back in the day because Gary thought that's what a lawyer needed to look like. And they didn't have an office. They literally had their files in the trunk of their cars. I like the story so much. I never pressed Alan and Gary of whether it was hyperbole or not, but I'm sure there's a lot of truth to it.
When you represent condominium associations in a large geographical area, especially at that time when the law was just burgeoning, I mean, they really were the authors of the original condo law.
We built this city. We built this city on rock and roll. Built this city. We built this city on rock and roll.
I had been working with the Tenants Association of Florida on tenant rights, and also my constituency included Northeast Aid, where there was this new thing going on called condominiums. And so part of my campaign was to campaign on the rights of purchases of condominiums. And we saw that they were starting to do conversions. And so we came up with the idea that, well, we already represent all these tenants really pro bono to help them with their tenant issues. But, you know, somebody's going to have to represent them on the conversions to condo and the new condos. We borrowed $10,000 to start our office on Miami Beach, and we were growing pretty rapidly representing these condominium associations, mostly on the conversions that were occurring, and really developing a whole new area of law, something that had never existed. So all the major firms were doing developer work. There was nobody doing the other side. And what I think was really interesting about the early years, and something I love to see our lawyers do today, and you know, there should be more of, is we had to come up with theories to buck the established legal system. You know, we became who we were by being strictly the anti-establishment. How essentially we were an all-community association firm from like 1972 up until, say, the mid-'80s. In the mid-'80s, we consciously decided to diversify. And we diversified first with the things that were easiest. We were doing construction litigation for condominiums. Well, a building's a building. If you can do it for a condominium, you can do it for any building. And so we got into other areas of construction. We figured if you can represent the association's vis-a-vis developers, you could represent developers. And so we got into real estate. And the smart developers figured it's better to hire us than to have us against them. And so we did.
The business model of the firm did not begin to evolve until sometime in the 90s. I founded what became the commercial litigation practice in the early to mid 90s. And it was in the 90s that we formed a government practice. Alan recruited Bernie Friedman, and things began to grow from there.
The Becker law firm opened an office in Prague back, I think it was in the 1990s. In the Czech Republic back then. I think it was still Czechoslovakia. Alan became the consul general. He even had a flag, and he had the consul general stamp. Alan learned the Czech language, actually had a tutor. And about 2 or 3 years later, we decided to go and meet with some young lawyers in the Czech Republic. And we met with Martin Klempel, and the rest is really history.
Were their management styles different?
The difference between Alan and Gary, well, let's see, how much time do we have? To say the least, let me emphasize this. Very different people. It's part of what made them a successful partnership because they each brought quite different skill sets. Gary was not one to loiter. He generally moved on from office to office fairly quickly. Gary really wasn't one for a lot of chit chat. That wasn't his strong suit. Alan, on the other hand, would sit down at the side chair in your office and schmooze. And before you knew it, 20 or 30 or 45 minutes could go by.
Alan was an idea guy. He was a concepts guy. So he would say, here's the idea, go do it. Polyakov was more of a minutia guy.
The most fun that we had, I think, was one of the firm retreats way back in the 90s. And each of the practice groups did television commercials, basically selling Becker Polyakov at the time. And there was a big competition.
Hello. Tell Bill Clinton he'll have to hold.
Alan's most recent book, How to Get Rich in Czechoslovakia.
Every year at the firm retreats, I would do the Perry Show, which was a collection of really, I mean, there was some kudos given out for sure, but mostly it was funny spoofs on people, and it was a lot of it was about if you had done something that required you to be laughed at, it would be in the show. And I would say this, that Alan and Gary were the best sports of all. They were literally almost no holds barred. You can say whatever you want. And Gary, I saw Gary double over and laugh sometimes when the joke was on him. I mean, that's the kind of guys they were.
Gradually, new opportunities came along, new ideas came along. opportunities both for practice expansion and geographic expansion. And we took advantage of those opportunities for both.
The firm has diversified. We have had expansion into the Northeast. So we have offices, in New York and Washington and New Jersey, which at one point I think would have probably been unthinkable. And they're thriving offices and they're doing very well.
Alan was a very forward thinker in most law firms, I think, don't make it through the first generational change. And he didn't want that to happen. And we were able to survive that transition.
It was a major pivot for the law firm. It came with a lot of change. When I stepped in 11 years ago, many, many things changed. And I think the law firm was ready.
Moving to Fort Lauderdale office was traumatic for many people. I can remember having a conversation with Bertie, and I'm gonna call him out on this, about moving to Fort Lauderdale. It was really tough for him because he lived right across the street almost from the office.
So I was adamantly opposed to moving the office. Gary Rosen, God bless him, had a lot of patience with me because I was sort of crazy on this issue. But I do want to publicly thank Gary Rosen for moving the firm to Fort Lauderdale. And sorry I made your life so miserable way back when.
Keep smiling, keep shining.
And I remember Alan said to me, I finally understand something you said to me when I started working here. So when I started working here, you told me power abhors a vacuum. And now I get it. Because you see, nobody had assigned Alan to take over the leadership that Jeff had before he went to the court. Alan saw a vacuum and took over the leadership. And it enabled him to propel his career. I'm probably most proud of the fact that we just don't practice law, we make law, and we've had some phenomenal accomplishments in making the law, whether through case law, whether through legislation, in a variety of fields.
It's family. It's not just a coworker, and it's like that across the board. It's really hard to explain, but there is a great sense of camaraderie, kinship. We just genuinely get along and we work well together, and everyone has each other's backs.
I will say that this law firm has been a wonderful professional home for me, and one that has allowed me to forge lifelong friendships. It's inescapable. That sense of collectiveness, that sense of mutuality, that sense of having each other's back, that sense of being in this together it's impossible to ignore. You just can't miss it.
Why do I love Becker? It's because we're family, and family is important to Becker. So for the last 5 years, my wife, Marta, has been battling pancreatic cancer. She's the fiercest warrior in the world, but when you're a warrior and you're in battle, you need an army. And Becker has been the army.
I have to think of Gary and Alan and their ability to bring people together that wouldn't ordinarily be together, to recognize your talents for who you are as a person. And I saw it all throughout the firm. So those memories I will never forget.
Anybody can come to us and say, I have an idea to do this differently and better. We'll take a look at it and put the technology behind them if it makes sense. So yeah, I think in those respects we're different from most firms with the opportunity that we afford. All you have to do is want to take advantage of it. Anybody here can step up, be creative, have an idea, develop a practice, and the firm will stand behind them.
I see a very, very bright future for this law firm. 50 years is a wonderful milestone. It's great to take a moment to pause, to reflect on the path that has led us to where we are today. But we're still moving. We're still very, very dynamic. I see nothing but blue sky ahead for Becker.
Blue skies smiling at me, nothing but blue skies do I see.